Okay, so I want to do an educational review of table tennis. Okay, and then this is from a point of view of someone who. So I played for New South Wales in under 21 table tennis, and then when I went into the US, I went to the national college championships. Into the I made it past the first round, the qualifier, and then I went to the national sort of the final round. I made it through the first round there, and kind of lost to some more serious players. So I spent a lot of time playing table tennis, and I kind of reflecting back, I want to review it sort of in terms of how good of a sport and it is for sort of education education purposes. Okay, so like, is it worth having your child take up table tennis, and sort of what level of seriousness should they approach it? So I think there's always room for sort of the very serious player who just loves it and dedicates all their time to it. There are a lot of kids I remember like that. Very notably from Victoria, they got very good at it because I think they really love the game. Um, but if you were to choose between like table tennis and other sports, like how would you make that decision? And so. I think the appeal of table tennis for me, especially educationally, is that um, it's a very strategic sport, um, and there's no contact. Okay, so these are like the main appeals. So you can win table tennis by outplaying your opponent in more of a pure way. So like choosing serves, there's more decisions. So it's very good educationally for the decision aspect of sports. Um, and so as opposed to like a sport like cricket. Okay, so I don't want to offend people because there's a lot of people that like cricket, but cricket's not very educational in the sense that um, at least not in this sense, because you don't get to make very many decisions. And and um so like for example, when you're fielding, you just basically you have maybe one decision is where to stand for every ball or something, and then the rest is kind of just reacting to what's happening. Um, when you're batting, you have more decisions, but in general, you're just trying to you're trying to get as many runs as possible. There's no conflicts like in but in table tennis, like you have a lot of different serves. You have to decide how to receive their serve, where to stand. Like it's and the adjustments happening so fast that it so like if you had to position yourself between balls, but balls were taking like split seconds to happen, then that would maybe be more interesting. Um, yeah, and so I think it was very good for that, and for me, I think I took it up because my grandfather and like basically it was cultural. Were very interested in table tennis, and so there were a lot of like icons that were really good at table tennis that people followed in China, for example, and so that kind of made it interesting. And Um, and the game was basically very fair. Okay, so it wasn't like it's basically it's symmetrical between like you and the other person, except for obviously. So like maybe someone had longer arms, but then there's it's not like in basketball where someone was just like obviously more advantaged in the game. But that also has its other lessons you can learn from that. Um, okay, and then again, then the no contact aspect is kind of like maybe like a more physically timid approach to sports. Like you don't risk, you basically had no injuries at all playing table tennis, except for this one stupid injury which actually occurred not from playing table tennis, but from buying the jerseys from my teammates. I bought too many and it kind of um, strained my arm. But basically, no injuries whatsoever from playing table tennis. Okay, so those are the good things. What about the bad things? So I guess I think the main thing that people learn from sport, you get a lot of that in table tennis, but I think you miss the main thing. So the main thing is that I think the competitiveness it exists in table tennis, but it's not quite the same competitiveness um, in as in other sports. Okay, so the competitiveness is different because fundamentally you're actually, especially in Australia, you're choosing a sport that less people play. So you're kind of avoiding a big part of the competition by playing a more like a niche sport. Okay, but like a sport like basketball, or actually soccer was mainstream when I was a student, but now it's like basketball as well. Like then you're really competing against everyone. Okay, shout out to mathematics, right? You're actually literally competing against the most people possible when you do mathematics, because everyone does mathematics. But anyway, so you're competing against less people. Another thing is, so the less people aspect of it is the team aspect, right? You're not really on a team. Like you're always playing singles. So the game itself is not a team game. Like even if you're playing doubles, like there's very little teamwork involved. Okay, and some of that's pleasant, some of it's unpleasant, right? Because you're responsible for your own failure and success individually, which can be more satisfying, especially if your teammates are letting you down, right? But but the team aspect of the game, I think, really you can actually learn a lot from the team aspect of a game because um because it's not just about the teammates letting you down, right? That's right. They're not the right way to think about it because you can also pull your teammates up and have a leadership potential. And this dynamic is fundamentally very interesting. And this is what kind of makes basketball interesting because like there's a lot of decisions which kind of they're difficult because they conflict in terms of your personal interest versus your team interest. Like sometimes you have like an 80% chance to score. You might pass that up to a player who has a 90% chance to score, right? But but a 90% chance to score is a better outcome for your team because you get more points in the long run, and so you win the game. But for you personally, like an assist isn't as glamorous as scoring a bucket, and you would have scored it pretty much 80% is basically the 100% when it comes to like eyeballing things. And so that really like I don't think a lot of people are even aware of those kind of things, but I think a lot of the time people do subconsciously make the decision to reward themselves at the expense of the team. And yeah, and I guess some of these things are only really educational if you get feedback. Okay. Um, yeah. So table tennis, I never really practiced. Like I thought I practiced, but I never actually like when I went to the US, I actually realized people actually practiced. That's like a totally different kind of situation. Whereas I think other sports, like you'd naturally be introduced to the idea of practice. Like if you're on a team, you'd have like a scheduled practice every week. Um, and take the game a bit more seriously. Yeah, so it's a different kind of sport. You're not getting the full sporting experience. But if you're primary school and you're developing your hand-eye coordination, it's great. It's like a great first step. Um, and it does have like lasting value. It's just sort of I feel like taking it super seriously is not very worth it or educational. But being exposed to it is kind of interesting. Um, I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. There's also I also played volleyball, but maybe I'll talk about that in another video, and you can subscribe for when that comes out. But yeah, let me know what you think. Are you gonna let your kids? Are you gonna encourage your kids to play table tennis? Um, oh, there's another thing I should mention was when we played table tennis for school. Okay, the school competitions are very strange. So we always travel to all these like rural schools in the middle of nowhere, and it was I don't know. It was weird because they obviously they had like maybe no interest in table tennis. It was kind of just like it's like almost like an you know how people kind of like they like to get out of class by enrolling in a sport and not taking it very seriously. It was kind of like that, and so they kind of made it a very different experience. It's not like you went to a school and there was like 100 people watching in the stadium cheering them on, and everyone wanted to win the game. It was more like you drove for longer like than the game, and you showed up in the middle of nowhere, and you played people who didn't know how to play, and yeah, I think that really does detract from the game a lot. Um, yeah, and also like when you're good at something like that and you play and you beat these people, they're not really impressed by sort of how good you are at something that's difficult, which is kind of a little bit annoying. They're more like sort of surprised that anyone would even be good at this kind of thing. Um, so like a little bit patronizing. Um, yeah, so it kind of yeah, so it's kind of weird. Like even the people who play the sport, not necessarily playing it properly, and kind of a lot of it's just like waste of time. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of activities. I don't know, like they kind of just exist, and you think they're good at the time, but when you kind of look at it from the bigger picture, you realize it's like, um, yeah. So at the moment, I think basketball is a better sport, but the risk is the risk is you kind of take it because I remember when I played basketball, like you get obsessed with basketball, and you might end up taking it too seriously, okay? Because the kind of seriousness that you approach with obsessions in basketball, I don't think is the kind of thing that's good for a high school student because like it's not because that kind of obsession will take up like 80% of your time, but like this is not like an 80% of your time activity, okay? Like sport is necessary in a high school student's education, but it's not important, okay? And that's what like a lot of schools don't understand. Sport is not important. It is necessary. Okay, and that's very different. So you need to do sport and you need to get like the educational value from sport and sporting commitments, but you need to limit that there. You can't just let that expand into the rest of your education, which I think predominantly should be mathematics, definitely intellectual development and stuff like that. All right, okay, okay. I talked a bit too long.